Welcome to Kicks and Minivans, the podcast for dads who love sneakers. I'm your host, KG. However you're watching and listening, man, we appreciate you being here, tuning in, hanging out with us. This is an episode, man, this conversation that we dive into today is so rich and so deep. You're going to want to listen all the way through, maybe multiple times, man. I think this is a conversation that is so needed for wherever you're at in your parenting journey, whether you got little kids like me in the house, you have teenagers, or maybe you don't have kids yet and you're kind of preparing for that one day in the future. This is an episode you will not want to miss. You're going to want to come back to this one multiple times probably. We're talking about influence today. So I think every parent has influence and we probably underestimate our influence. We're going to get into that. Our guest today is Anthony Hunt. He is the lead kids pastor at my church here in Indiana, Traders Point Church. He oversees the kids ministry throughout all 5 campuses. There's almost 2,000 kids that attend every week, 4,000 that would call Traders Point their church home, just kids. I think he said over 800 or 900 volunteers throughout all 5 campuses. I mean, just an amazing ministry that he is leading out. He's also a dad to 5 little girls. So we pray for him. But just an amazing guy, full of life and energy and joy. You guys are going to love hearing from him. Before we dive into that conversation, I want to share with you about our sponsor, N8 Solutions. Nate is an awesome leader and leadership coach. He is someone that, man, if you were in a spot where you were trying to figure out what's next, what's my calling, what's my purpose, you're feeling kind of muddled in life and you want to get to the next level, or you're looking through a breakthrough, Nate is the guy. He is the guy to go to. He helps people unleash their best from within. And so the way it works is, he sits down in leadership coaching sessions. It's not quite therapy. There's a little bit that might feel like that in there, but it's a little more vast than that. But man, you can sit down, you can schedule a free consultation with him. You go over to n8leader.com, schedule a free consultation with him. You can sit down with him. He can learn about you. You can learn about him. He's not pushy. He's not salesy. He wants to help you be at your best. And that's what we're all about here. We want to help men win in marriage and parenting. And I believe that the best way we could do that as husbands and as dads is for us to be in our healthiest spot. And Nate is a great resource and tool to have if you are feeling like you need a breakthrough to get to your healthiest spot. So I encourage you, check out N8 Solutions. Again, that's n8leader.com. Go there and book your free consultation today. All right, well, without any further ado, let's jump into this conversation. Welcome, Anthony Hunt. Well, Anthony, welcome to Kicks and Minivans. Thanks for joining us, bro.
What's up, KG? Good to be here, my man.
Hey, so good to have you. Give us a little snapshot. You have a crazy world. You are surrounded by kids like 24/7.
Yes, right.
Like give us a snapshot of your world, man.
Yeah, so at home, I've got 5 kids, 5 daughters. They're all girls, and our oldest is 7. So we've got 7, 5, 4, 3, and a 5-month-old now. So it's wild. And then I serve in a kids ministry at a church, so I'm surrounded by kids there. I'm surrounded by kids at home. It's just like nonstop, but it's awesome. It's a blast.
Dude, you are the definition of a girl dad.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. 5 girls in the house, like.
Yes, I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and she was like, "What are the odds that you would have 5 girls?" I'm like, 6%. The odds are 6%. And I feel very fortunate. Of like, oh man, that's awesome that I'm in this unique world. They're all so young right now. I've got a lot of girl dads talking to me that are like, just wait, those preteen, teenage years, things shift a little bit. I think we'll have 4 girls that are all in high school. All of our girls, all 5, will be in middle school and high school at the same time. So it's like, that'll be something, man. I'm eager and I'm ready.
We will all collectively pray for the Hunt family in about a decade.
Yes.
In 10 years, like you are on all of our prayer lists. By the time the baby's in high school, though, like you're going to have this thing figured out.
Well, totally. Yes, we'll have it all figured out. It'll be great.
But she'll be so different from the rest, probably. That like,
yes.
Every kid is different. So, dude, that's so fun. And we were just talking. It's a couple thousand kids at the church.
Yeah.
That you're leading teams with as well.
Yeah, lots of kids there. It's amazing, man. The church that I work at, we've got 5 campuses, and they're all filled with kids. And just even statistically, with where churches are at, we're on the higher end of young families. Our specific church. So like, there's just, I mean, anywhere from 20 to 30% of the total attendance of the church. It's like a fifth or a fourth even sometimes of the church is all, under the age of 12. That's crazy. So yeah, it's a blast though. It's so much fun.
It is. Well, it's such a great area for young families too. This part of Indiana is just populated with young families. And so, man, it's what you guys are doing there. You guys are absolutely crushing it. I tell you guys as often as I can. I love what you guys are doing and leading out with the kids there and the whole church in general. So, all right, this is Kicks and Minivans. Let's talk a little bit of both. Because if I remember correctly, you just upgraded your minivan, right? Like you got 5 kids. Like a minivan's like a necessity for you guys, right?
For sure. Listen, I've been a minivan guy. I love the name of your podcast, Kevin. I've been a minivan guy. My first car was a minivan. It was Oh, for sure. And
like I was.
Oh, yes. And I loved it. I paid $600 for this thing. It was a 1997 a Dodge Grand Caravan Sport.
Yes.
Okay. Sport. Like it had cool,
Sport edition.
It had a cool racing stripe. Like it was really neat. I added, I was really cool in high school. I added neons to the bottom of the minivan, and I had a CB radio inside. At one point we put a basketball hoop on the side of the van too. So we would just park it in the driveway and shoot hoops. It was awesome, but
was it like a mini hoop or like a full?
It was a full hoop that somebody had thrown away, and we're like, get that. So we took the backboard off of the pole and just, attached it to the minivan. It was awesome, man.
Did you drive around or did you put it up every time?
Yes.
Was it always up?
It was usually up. It didn't last for too long. We didn't secure it properly, but what we would do, and I don't think we broke any laws by doing this, so I think I could share this. We went to, one of my buddies lived on a farm. We would go to his open, a lot of land that was around there, and one of our buddies would drive the van, and so it'd be like a moving basketball hoop. And so we would shoot the hoop while shoot baskets while the car was in motion. But if a minivan can withstand that type of fun, why would anybody? What's this thing about people not wanting minivans? I don't understand. It is so much fun, so practical. Totally, man.
SUVs overrated.
Totally.
You can't open the doors with a button in an SUV.
Exactly.
Come on,
so yeah,
man.
the reason we had to upgrade our minivan is because we kept up. I don't want to say upgrading our family. Adding more, more. Yeah, it's like we kept adding family members. So the minivan that we had previously didn't work. There wasn't enough car seat holders in it, which was amazing. That it's oh wow, our family has now outgrown a minivan. So we got a new minivan with a fancy sliding middle seat, and the features in minivans now, they're crazy.
They're amazing. They're like luxury cars. I don't care
It's
what
amazing.
anyone says. Some of these minivans are luxury cars. So what are you driving now?
So it's a Honda Odyssey, which is awesome. It's incredible. I forget what year it is or what the trim level is or any of that. I should have been more prepared to talk that. But
somebody at North Campus just put on Facebook, and they've got 7 kids. And she's like, "Hey, I'm looking for a Honda Odyssey. I look at dealers. Is anyone selling one?" And I was like, "That's my dream vehicle."
Oh, dude.
I'm dude, the
They're
Honda
amazing.
Odyssey is the cream of the crop, man.
Yeah, it's so cool. We haven't fully even dove into all the features. There's one feature where, and I don't know how we traveled cross country. We took long vacations as a kid growing up in a five person family, 5-seat car. No
Was
TVs.
it the station wagon?
Dude, yeah, we had
the station wagon we traveled.
It wasn't the station wagon where you sit in the trunk and with no seat belts at all. Turned around facing backwards. It wasn't quite that level, but it didn't have all the TVs and movie screens. Dude, traveling's great. I love it.
Our minivan has 2 screens, one for the middle row and one for the back row.
Crazy.
Y'all are spoiled.
Seriously.
There's even an HDMI cord back there. I could plug my Xbox in. I'm you kids, my wife's going to drive, and I'm going to play Xbox with the kids in the back.
Yes.
That's how it's going to go down.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the buttons on our car. It's you push the button, and then you can talk to the headphones in the back. So it's like you don't even need to yell anymore to the back seat of the car. It's just like I can just lovingly
don't have that.
say quietly, like, "Hey, children, like, we're
have
stopping
that.
soon. Does anyone need to go potty? You know,
Get
like,
your shoes on.
yes.
No snacks.
That's right,
dude. That's amazing. We don't have that feature, so that's at least not that I know about. But
Yeah,
dude,
who knows?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk kicks a little bit too. Do you have a favorite pair? Are you a big sneaker guy? Or
So I am not. But I have prepared for you 2 pieces of my favorite footwear, which I think will reveal a lot about me, and will show just how much of a sneakerhead I am not. Okay, so first up, we got the Dr. Scholl's slip-on. Okay, so this is
goes with everything.
Yeah, you got the gray, just, neutral, long-lasting. Dr. Scholl's too, by the way. It's like I wouldn't. As the joke goes, it doesn't take a doctor to know that like stepping on a pillowy cushion all day is going to be beautiful. I would have bought this from a Mr. Scholl's, So it's like, but this is the men's equivalent of the Madison slip-on, which is the female version. So there we go. That's mine. Here's my other piece of footwear. Okay, I brought this in too. This is an aggressive inline skate. I've been doing some blading. Does this count as a piece of footwear? This is the Rosas
it goes on your foot.
M12.
You are the first. This is the one of its kind on Kicks and Minivans. This is the first. There we go, first, dude.
So I've been starting to blade. Okay, if you blade, you never fade, as they say. And I've picked up this as a hobby. There's a skate park across the street. So those are my favorite pieces of footwear. So does that qualify as
dude? I love it. I absolutely love it. The fact that you brought a rollerblade on just made my day. That is a first. That's a first. I've been wanting a pair of Heelys. Do you know about the Heelys?
Oh yeah, I know about those.
Oh dude, I'm like, they used to be like so cool when I was in high school.
And now they're coming back. I see them now.
A little bit. I like stopped wanting to get one because they're coming back.
Okay.
I wanted a pair before they like started becoming trendy again. I'm like, I'm gonna wait till they're not trendy and then I'll go buy one.
There you go. But, well, there's another shoe as well, like the light up shoes. I don't know if those are in trend, but I'm so jealous of kids, man. The kids sneaker option. I don't know if you agree on this, but like, cause with like Jordans and stuff, they make adult size and kid size. So that's cool. But like, I can't find an adult size light up shoe or I don't know, Healy. I don't even know where to go to get those, but I got to do some more digging. But I'm jealous of kids, man. They got cool shoes and I can't have the same equivalent.
They get the Star Wars shoes, we're recording this on May the 4th.
Yes.
Like, they could get the Star Wars shoes. I can't get them. Like,
jealous, man.
Come on. They do some of those, like Adidas does a lot of collaborations with, like some anime stuff, some Star Wars. Like I actually have a pair of Dame Star Wars where it's like based off of Luke Skywalker.
Fantastic.
His lightsaber.
Yes.
And so like I love that pair. I don't wear it very often, but I love that pair. So it's like they do some cool collaborations and stuff. Adidas does. But yeah, like you don't see those, awesome. Some of those fun ones that, as a kid's pastor would be really fun to wear and rock on a Sunday morning.
Totally. Yes. I've seen this pair of shoes on the internet and it's for kids, or like on eBay, you could find them where it's this really cool looking, it's Toy Story shoes, but it's like Woody dressed up like Woody on one and then Buzz Lightyear on the other. But like, dude, it looks so awesome. I think that would be my dream sneaker right there. Because it's like on eBay, like the kid size shoes are, I forget, man, like $500. I don't know. I know shoes get way higher, right? Like that's only like scratching the surface. So maybe
that's scratching the surface.
All right, I should just dive in and get a custom pair of Woody and Buzz shoes. I'm doing it. This is it.
That's not, it's not like in the sneaker world. It's like you got some that are in the tens of thousands. That's, I'm like, even if I made it, I don't know if I could, like even if I hit the jackpot, like I don't know if I could ever spend that amount on.
Yeah, because do you even wear it at that point, or you just like?
I'd be too scared.
Right. Yeah.
I'd be too scared to wear it. It's like I think like my most reasonable dream shoe is probably about $1,000, and it's like even then, like I'm like, I don't know that I would ever, even if we had millions, like I don't know, like maybe if I had millions, I'd probably get it. But
you could swing it, yeah.
I'd swing that. That's a drop in the bucket at that point. But,
yes.
Yeah. No, they do get pretty crazy. So.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's dive in, man. Tell us a little bit about your job at Traders, what that entails. How did you get involved in?
Yeah, so I serve on the kids team. I'm a kids pastor, you could say. I help out I'm on our central team, so I help out with all of the campuses that we have, and then also the content that we create, that we teach kids basically from week to week. And we come up with all sorts of content to set up volunteers to serve the kids, to teach the kids themselves, and then we set up some content to help equip parents as well. And then there's the full other segment of like, how do we actually keep kids safe and have all these different buildings from around Indianapolis that have kids in it. How do we actually make Sundays roll? So it's amazing. When I look back, I still can't believe I've been doing this for like 8 years now at this point. I've been serving in going to Traders Point Christian Church here in Indy for 10 years, and I cannot believe that I'm doing this vocationally. This was not the plan. I did not go to Bible college saying I want to be a pastor one day. It was very much the opposite. I was working in the marketplace. I was serving in a role at Coca-Cola. I was in sales and marketing, and it was a blast, man. I loved it. I loved that job, and it was great. I thought I would be with Coca-Cola forever. Doors were opening. It was like everything made sense to like of what the world was, calling me to, of like, or what like success, what I thought success looked like in terms of a high prestige job, a lot of opportunities, compensation, potential, all of that, like by the world standards, like everything was opened up and it made sense. And then it's like, to be hit with, I was serving as a small group leader in a 4th grade room here at Traders Point as a volunteer. And, a couple people were like, hey, we see something in you. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't. So would you ever consider a job, going into full-time ministry? I'm like, absolutely not. When I went on, I did eventually after like a year of wrestling and fighting, I'm like, all right, I'll go on an interview. This is gonna be ridiculous. I had to bring in though my resume because I'm like, I'm pretty sure they haven't seen this. Like I'm so unqualified. At Coca-Cola, it's like, man, all that matters is your education, your experience, your credentials, your accomplishments. And here it's like, wait, you're going to hire somebody who feels called and then you'll equip them to do it. It's like, that was a total shift of a paradigm for me career-wise. But I've found out over the last 8 years, like just how much this is in my wheelhouse for my purpose and my calling, as opposed to why do I work, for all those external factors of like, what's seen as a noteworthy career versus how do I maximize the joy and fulfillment in my life? And it's not to say that in order to do that you have to work at a church. That's not what I'm saying. But rather, if you're working within your purpose and unique skill set and calling, like that's what I found was true of me when I moved into ministry, and it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story, and it's. We talked on the episode with Jason Coldiron. We were just talking about that episode where we talked about like, how do you define success? And it's ultimately it's being where God has you. It's like if God's called you to full-time ministry and you're running from that, you're not going to find that fulfillment and joy elsewhere. If he hasn't called you to it and you're like kind of forcing your way into it because it's what you should do, you're not going to feel fulfilled and joyful in that if that's not what God's called you. Like for some people, God has called them to the marketplace, and that's still, as Pastor Kyle talked about last Sunday, that's still full-time ministry,
Right.
And so it's like, I love that shift of perspective that he gave in that message. So how is it being a kids pastor? Because, I was a kids and youth pastor for 8 years out in the Philly area. I left full-time ministry when Jace was about 6 months old.
Okay. Yep.
And that whole 6 months was COVID. He was born 2 weeks before COVID shut everything down. So it's like, man, I went back to work from paternity leave, and like that Wednesday of that week was when like the NBA shut down and everything stopped. So like, I really didn't experience normal life with a kid. How is it being in full-time kids ministry and having 5 kids at home? Like how... Like, do you just feel like you're going to go insane sometimes? Like,
yes. Well, for me, I love it because I find that it's really lined up into, I would say there's pros and cons. Like on the side that I love and that's good, it's right in my wheelhouse of like what God's called me to do, my purpose. I enjoy being around kids so much. And I one of the things that kind of like, as I'm doing over the, a long time ago when I first started actually at Traders Point 8 years ago, I really dove into like, why am I put on this earth? What is the unique thing that God's calling me to? Like you said, it's like, as long as we're within where God calls us, but how do you know that? And so I did like a deep dive, really thinking about it, chewing on it, reflecting, like, what has God called me? How am I wired? What am I passionate about? What are some things that are unique about me? What do other people call out in me? So as I'm like thinking through all this, I had this light bulb moment. It was a Friendsgiving. The day before Thanksgiving, is that when you do like hang out with all your friends or whatever before Thanksgiving? And I noticed something where we went over to our friend's house, and it was like 90 minutes in, an hour and a half in, and I had been downstairs in the basement the whole time, because if there's a basement and there's a lot of kids, like that's the best place to be at a party, in my opinion. So like we were having Nerf battles, we've got the VR headset, we're playing video games, I'm building, Lego bricks. It was the time of my life, but like 90 minutes like went by like that. And so my kids were, I only had a few and they were young at the time, and we were just having so much fun. And I look up and I realize like, there's no other grown-ups down here. Like I've been the only adult. This is kind of weird actually. Like I need to go upstairs, like, cause there's usually that separation of like all the grown-ups are upstairs mingling, all the kids are downstairs. And I just naturally gravitate toward going downstairs. Like that's more fun for me personally. And so in that aspect, like where I really kind of whittled down of like my if you were to call it like your purpose statement, which sounds so formal, but like my calling, that I view my life is I want to use my energy and enthusiasm to make a difference in the life of kids. And so whatever I do, if it's vocational, if it's informal, if it's volunteer work, like I know that I'm going to maximize the impact that I make and the fulfillment that I get if I'm within that framework. So can I use my energy and enthusiasm, and am I making a difference in kids' lives? Like that's going to be the most for me. And so being a kids pastor does that. It also overlaps at home as well. But the flip side of that, I would say the threat or the downside specifically to being a kids pastor is I've got the looming threat of hypocrisy at all times. Like my kids get a front row seat of, Dad, we see you as an awesome pastor. Like the kids at church, they get, that's what they say or whatever. And it's not bragging. That's like more of like the kids, just saying the kids at church get my best. It's easy for me to show up to work and perform to a degree. It's like I'm not gonna lose my patience or like get angry at a kid at church. Like, no, I'm there to serve them, and that's my role, and I'm being paid to do that and all that. But then at home, my kids see the worst of me. It's like I have to ask for forgiveness all the time and repent and all of that at home. And so it's like that dichotomy of, Dad, you seem so happy and joyful and patient and kind and all this stuff, all the fruits of the Spirit are at church, but at home, it's like, well, I've been working all day. I'm on a short fuse, and I'm not just there for an hour during service and then send the kid off. But it's the unrelenting nature of us, the 5 girls, me and my wife. Like we're home for a full day. Like that stuff adds up so quickly.
Surrounded by it. Yeah. No, I love. Thanks for sharing that. That realness of it, because I mean, it can be easy to see someone for an hour or two on Sunday morning.
Oh yeah,
and think like, oh, they're just always like that. And in a way, it's like, man, you feel like you have to be when you're in full-time ministry. You feel like you have to be that way, especially on a Sunday.
Yes.
But like, man, it's such a battle, I know, to make sure like, hey, I want my family to get the best of me. And I think too, we could talk for a whole episode about asking your kids for forgiveness, like you said. Because I got into a debate with someone on Facebook. I try to not get into debates on Facebook. But like he's like, oh, I'll never apologize to my kids and ask for forgiveness. And I was like, why? Like, why not? Like, do you want to burn all bridges with your kids?
Right.
By the time they're teenagers? Like, I apologize to my kids multiple times a day, I feel like.
Right. Right.
Like, I'm like, dude, I'm not a perfect person. I'm not. And my kids are the first ones that see that, because I'm with them 24/7.
Yes.
Like they're the first ones that see that. And so, man, we need to normalize apologizing to our kids and asking for forgiveness, because there's no shame in that. It's actually very healthy for our kids to see that.
Yeah. I love that. I would affirm your perspective there too, KG, of apologizing, because it's like, why don't you apologize? Is it because you haven't done anything wrong? Or, it's like, well, if that's the case, I mean, I would love to learn from that person who, it's like, no, we all have flaws. And how can we expect our kids to learn how to say they're sorry if they never see it modeled? It's like, Is the expectation here that like we have it all together, we're a perfect parent and they don't, they're flawed children? It's like, man, we're way more alike with kids. In fact, like kids are better than grownups at so many things. Like we actually should learn from them, way more. So it's like, what is the parent-kid relationship? What are those roles? I love how there's an author named Paul Tripp. He stated specifically in his book Parenting, he said, in any moment of discipline or in any moment of difficult parenting, if any moment of you having to apologize or you lose your patience or the kid's struggling with some sort of behavior or whatever it might be, in any moment of difficult parenting, he says, two people are being parented at the same time. Like two people are growing. It's the parent being stewarded by God to parent the child, but it's also God using that opportunity to grow you as a parent. It's like nothing's going to grow you more than those difficult moments of, man, we have a lot to learn, and our Heavenly Father is parenting us in those moments as well. So yeah, there's a lot of humbling yourself, admitting when you're wrong, modeling what it looks like to say, hey, I messed that up and I'm so sorry. That's what keeps the relationship intact as well. So I totally affirm your perspective there.
It's more manly to be able to shoulder that.
Yeah.
And admit when you're wrong than to just act like you made no mistake.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It takes more courage and bravery to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that perspective. All right. So if I say the phrase, everyone has influence, is that a phrase that you would agree with or disagree with? Or like, what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on that? If I say everyone has influence.
Yeah. I have the mind of a literal, like a child's brain of like literal thinker. So it's like, okay, well, let's just define influence. Is that the capacity that somebody has to have an effect on someone's behavior or character development? Okay, I think anybody has that capacity. I think God's given that to all of us, where it's like we live in community. We were hardwired for relationship, and that's not just, like I say, God built us for that. Like science backs that up too. How we were all built for community. It's like when any sort of like social isolation, if the pandemic taught us anything, or any type of like isolation, what that does to a person physiologically, it's just overwhelming that we were meant to live in community with another, in relationship. It's one of the primary ways that we grow and develop as people and interact in this world. And so to say that everybody has influence, I think so. Varying degrees, we all impact each other's behavior and development. And there's probably a spectrum of like, some have a very strong amount of influence, others don't for a lot of different reasons. But I think that I would say everybody does have influence. What would you say?
I like what you said about varying in degrees.
Yeah.
Because it's clear, like, you can look and say, like, okay, the president of the United States has a lot of influence, regardless of whether you agree with his policies or not. Like, he has a lot of influence.
Yeah.
Someone like Elon Musk has a lot of influence, right? Someone in your position, being the kids pastor of, a church with that many kids, like, you have a lot of influence. You're impacting a lot of families. However, I would also think, like, all right, I may not have as much influence over as many people as like a Jeff Bezos does. However,
sure,
I have more influence over my kids than he does. And so it's varying degrees. I like that we're all on a framework somewhere where it's like certain people you have more influence, and some people have wider influence. Some people have that deeper influence. And like with where I'm at right now, my influence isn't as wide, but it's deep. With the listeners of this podcast, with my family in specific, it's the deeper influence. But I think, like you said, there's varying degrees. Do you think people tend to underestimate or overestimate their amount of influence, or could that also be a varying degree?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And even before I answer that, one thing to react to and what you said of like, it just made me think of even the term social influencer, social media influencer. I want to be an influencer. It's like people want influence I just wanted to it reminded me of exactly what you said of like calling specifically. If like someone's trying to shove their way into having influence versus humbly humbly just accepting whatever has been given to them, or like where should I focus my influence? Yeah, that's just what I was thinking too. It's like where should I direct my influence? Where do I have it? Where don't I have it? Which speaks into your question there. Do people underestimate it or overestimate their influence? I think it depends on the sphere of what we're talking about. I think people might overestimate the influence they have on social media, and underestimate the influence they have in those deep relationships that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And maybe I would even say it this way. It's like, and this is anecdotal, but I observe that many parents underestimate the influence that they have and overestimate the credentials they think they need to parent. Where it's like, you have a ton of influence, but you think that you need all these degrees and expertise, and you got to be perfect. It's just not the case. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I think people overestimate the amount of influence they have in Facebook debates about politics.
Yeah.
And they underestimate the amount of influence that they have at home.
Yes, that's great.
What really matters the most, because what's happening in your house, I think, is vastly more important than what's happening in the White House.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like, you can fret all you want about what's happening nationally, globally. At the end of the day, like, you can't really change all that. But you have drastic influence over what's happening in your house, especially if you're the man of the house. That's nothing against the moms in the house. Moms have a super important role, but there's just so much science that backs up the influence of a father. And this is a podcast for dads. We have some moms that listen to it, but this is a podcast for dads. And so, it's like, talking to dads, it's like, man, you most likely underestimate the amount of influence that you have over your kids at home.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so many dads specifically, I know this was my tendency in the marketplace, certainly, was, I'm very focused on the influence that I have at work. And that kind of like creeps into even like shadow side of some of my good qualities or wirings as a person, where it's like, oh, I really want to pay attention and focus on the influence that I have with people for the sake of climbing the corporate ladder, or, making the most of my career, whatever that was. So it's like, okay, wrong motives. But when I look at that, how much time was I focused on, well, what's my influence at home? And traditionally, it's like, and this is kind of painting with a broad brush, this isn't certainly all dads, but we have a tendency to abdicate our responsibility at home, thinking about just cultural, socio-cultural responsibilities that we have, where it's like men working outside the home. What's our role in the home? I think we can get that flipped a lot, where it's like, what if we had just as much intentionality in the home as with what we brought to work with those dads that if their dad's working? It's I think it's a drastic underestimation of what can be done at home.
Yeah. So I think you and I would probably both agree, tell me if I'm wrong, that the parent is the most influential person in the life of a child.
For sure.
Whether that's mom or dad, a collection of both, however your family dynamic is set up. Is that something you would agree with?
Yes. Oh, for sure. And hands down, this isn't just like what I believe. It's like science backs this up nonstop too. It's like it's overwhelmingly factual that, for better or for worse, the number one influence, what determines a child's ability to grow up, be healthy, be secure, be responsible, the traits that they have, the things that rub off on them for better or for worse, like those are passed down for better or for worse. And what's so hard, it's like, even looking at some of the science of trauma and kids that grow up with a really rough upbringing, who say, I will never be like my mom or never be like my dad, are still so heavily impacted by their upbringing. Like, it's outside of their control, where it's like they still have that. Just one example, for instance, and I took it down a negative road. I should have been more optimistic here, but a lot of kids that grow up in foster care, for instance, are like, okay, I never want any kid, they're very passionate, I never want any kid to have the life that I had growing up. So I want to be able to provide foster care. But because of the lack of healthy, secure attachments that they had growing up, the lack of parental influence that they had, whether it was an absent parent or an unhealthy parent or an abusive parent or hurtful parent, whatever it was, like that creeped in despite their best intentions and motives to never be like those parents. I want to do something different. Many foster kids that grow up being foster parents, like, still don't have the tools, the ability to help attached securely to their child. It's like you still see that gap in kind of like the cliche counseling thing of like you go and you talk about your childhood. Like, why is that? Why do we all as adults have so much to unwind and debrief of like, oh, this all stems back to childhood? Because it really does. Like our parents for sure influenced us so much.
Oh my goodness. So much that happens to you before the age of 18. Just, by the age of 18, so many people are just, they're set for life in the way that they think, the way they view the world, the way they operate. Right. And it's very hard to change that.
Yes.
It can be, but it's like, man, you're going through hours and sometimes years of counseling and therapy to make that happen. And it's like, man, we've said it on this podcast plenty of times, there is no shame in going to therapy. And some of the greatest work I've done on myself has been sitting in a counselor's office.
For sure.
Where it's like, man, I've learned so much about myself through that process. And wouldn't have been able to get to where I am today without that, because there was so much from my childhood that I didn't even realize, as a man in my late 20s, early 30s, that I didn't even realize how much that childhood stuff was impacting me. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you. So I also think like we're on the same page that, and science, like you said, backs up, like a parent is the most influential voice in the life of a kid. And I think most parents, and I think myself included, underestimate the amount of influence we have in the life of our kids. And that influence can change as they get older, right? Like all of our kids, yours and mine, are pretty young right now. Like we understand, mine are 3 and 1. We understand we have a lot of influence when they're that age.
Yes.
That changes a little bit as they get older. But I think you also wouldn't be doing what you're doing for a career if you thought a parent should be the only voice of influence in the life of a kid. And I think parents can get caught up in that if they overestimate the amount of influence that they have, especially as their kids creep towards the teenage years. What's your thoughts on, it's this idea of like, it takes a tribe, it takes a village, people talk about all the time. What's your thought on having other voices of influence present in the life of a kid? Yeah, outside of just the parents.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. I totally affirm what you're saying. Yes, the parent is hands down the biggest influence, for better or for worse, in a child's life, but they're not the only influence that a child needs. I totally affirm that. And I see that all the time. A lot of the research, in terms of faith development specifically, a lot of the research shows that without a doubt, the parent is the number one influence in the child's faith, with whatever your child sees, like that's what they're gonna become in terms of like their faith, what's modeled, that type of thing. But then, yes, it's not the only voice that they need. One of the other things, Kara Powell wrote a book along with a co-author called Sticky Faith, and the idea was, okay, what is actually making a kid's faith stick? So specifically, you're talking about, preteen, teenage years when they're forming their identity, determining what they believe, who they are, like the things that are going to set their trajectory for the rest of their life. What can make a faith stick with a child? And she talked about a couple of different things. First, like the modeling of a parent's faith, like that's going to be the top indicator of a child's faith growing up, without a doubt, hands down. However, there's also something to be said about intergenerational worship and relationships. Like those were the other biggest things that impacted a kid's lifelong, vibrant faith in Jesus, is how much do they have different voices speaking in? It can't just happen at home. And so it can, but in general, it's like they found that in the situations where a kid's faith and identity and health and responsibility, like good character, integrity, like those kids, what did those kids have when they were growing up? That's kind of what that sticky faith research looked like. And she found that a lot of kids that had 5 other voices speaking into their life, reinforcing the truths that parents are speaking, adding perspectives that their parents don't provide. Like if kids have 5 other voices in their life growing up, they're just gonna be set up really, really well. And that's not 5 perfect voices. Like that's just 5 different voices. It's I see it firsthand too. It's so funny, KG. When I'm at church and the amount of parents that come to us, we'll teach on something, whatever the we're talking about a character trait of the Bible, or we're debriefing something with a kid in a small group of like ways they can grow in their faith, but also just like them as a person. If there's some characteristic they're trying to work on, like, and a small group leader or a church staff, kids pastor, will say something to the kid and we'll inform the parent like, hey, yeah, Johnny grew a ton this Sunday. He said that he's going to now like clean his room all the time, or be responsible, or read his Bible, or whatever the thing is that, he's working on, or like he's going to go apologize to his sister or whatever. And the parent's like, are you kidding me? I have been trying to tell him to do that for the last year. You say it once and he does it. Like, what is this? And it's like, well, there are times in a kid's life where just because you're the parent, they're going, it's like, they're not going to hear you. So, yes, definitely need more voices.
That reminded me, when I was in high school, I was a typical teenage boy, right? And so, I didn't listen to my parents very often. It wasn't like super bad going out, whatever. But like, they'd be like, Kevin, take out the trash. And they'd have to tell me like 87 times to take out the trash before I did it. And it's like, I get annoyed because they're nagging me. And I think my dad told my youth pastor, he's like, can you take Kevin out to lunch and talk to him? And so he took me out to lunch. And then, I'm sitting there and I remember Pastor Dave, we're sitting there and I was complaining about my parents. And he's like, well, why did they nag you? I'm like, oh, they want me to take out the trash. And he's like, well, what if like the first time they told you to do it, what if you just did it?
Crazy thought. Crazy. Like
16-year-old me was like, that might work.
Yeah. Yes.
And then I was like, oh yeah, like Dave told me like if I took out the trash the first time that you guys wouldn't ask me 100 times. My dad's like, serious? Like really?
Yes.
Really? Like but it's like, man, like I had to have somebody else tell me that. Because I was a knucklehead 16-year-old. Like, I just wasn't hearing it from them. Like, I needed another person telling me something that they were telling me 1,000 times.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I love one of the, you said like just going out to lunch with your youth pastor in that book, Sticky Faith. I think it's from that book. But the principle, they talk about an exercise of like, oh, how do you go about finding those voices? Like, how can you just add some intentionality to that? And they provide an example of like, hey, pick 5 people, and over the course of like, it's May now, so over the course of the summer, just set up 5 times where that person can speak life into that kid. If assuming they're a safe adult and everything, it's like figuring out how and when to do that. But it's like if it's an uncle or a youth pastor or a neighbor or whatever, like go out to lunch or join. In the book, they talk about like one of the influences in their child's life was a friend who was a police officer. So it's like, hey, just go do a ride along with the police officer, and so it's like just go see what they do. So it like diversifies them, it opens up their worldview, it sees different perspectives, and they learn a bunch of stuff. And then at the end of the summer, they had all 5 of those adults come over for dinner and just speak life and encouragement over their kid. And it was like, man, that sounds so awesome. Like to be able to all pray for that kid. And that sounds so intentional. And but how hard would that be? Like write down 5 names, ask them, hey, can you pick a day like from now until whatever to spend time with my kid, or come over here and we're going to play out in the backyard. Yeah. Can you just like have some intentional conversation with him and then come over for dinner in August and with some other mentors? Like, man, what that would do for a kid who knows too, like how secure and confident would you be as a kid if you're like, man, I got all these people looking out for me.
Like all these guys are backing me up right
yes,
now.
Yes. And like, oh, now I know, by the way, when something happens in my life, I know who to go to. Because I don't know about your upbringing, KG, but I know I was often in a spot as a kid where I'm like, something happened to me. I was trying to wrestle with something, and like, how do I have to figure it out? Like, I don't know. I'm talking to my friends. Like, I grew up pre-internet age, basically. It's like I couldn't go to Google, but like, I mean, that's even more terrifying. It's like, how are they looking for answers or support or love or whatever? It's like, and not to say that all the internet's evil. There could be very helpful, supportive communities online for sure, but there's also not. And so if a kid's just going to their friends to work through those things, like, man, that's a coin toss on. And is the friend who's also a adolescent peer gonna guide them with love and responsibility? And it's like, I don't know. Is the internet gonna do that? I don't know. But like, goodness. Now they know who to go to. So
all right. So let me ask you a little bit about the those, you said they talked about the 5 voices. Are those like 5 specific voices? I know like sometimes when they talk about like friendships, like you need an encourager, you need a coach, you need a mentor. Like, is it 5 specific voices, like different quality type of voices? Or is it just like, hey, you just need to get 5 people that will kind of say the same thing mom and dad were saying, just in a different way? What's like kind of the nature of those 5 voices?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that adds an entire other level of intentionality with the book of what it was talking about. It's like find 5, find 5. You're going to have some diversity. 5. It's not going to be perfect. It's like, yeah, certainly you can add some intentionality there of like, what are the main character things we want to instill, or what's the character trait we want to put in enter into our child, or what's the message that they're not hearing, or what's the biggest pain point in their child's life that might speak into helping. Okay, which voices speak into it? I love how you're saying it too, though. It's like encourager, coach. If there are different roles like that, I think that's amazing too. So any other level of intentionality for sure. But I think those things will naturally play themselves out. If you pick 5, like chances are they're gonna be different people. Some people will have the natural gifting of encouraging. Others will have the natural gifting of coaching or whatever it might be. Some might give the perspective of like a loving friend, whereas others are like they can they have the trust and longer term relationship that they can speak some truth of like actually rebuke and train that child of like, hey, but they have that level of trust. I think that's the other thing that comes to mind is like varying levels of trust with a kid too, because it's like, hey, here's my friend Bob. You've never met Bob, but you're going to go out, hang out with him for a day at his work. Like, I don't know how well that's going to work for the kid. It's like, who's Bob? I don't trust Bob. I'm not listening to Bob either, So, to be very selective, I think is wise.
So how does a parent go about finding those voices? Because for some people, they might listen and be like, oh, I got 5.
Yeah.
I could do that. Others might be listening and it's like, well, I could come up with maybe 1 or 2. So how does a parent go if they're starting from scratch? Like, how do you go to build those relationships?
Yeah, that's great. And talk about yet another element of raising kids that impacts us and helps us grow as dads specifically. So I mean, all the research too of the amount of social isolation that dads have, the research of most dads don't have one genuine friend. It's like, man, that's so sad, but yet it's so wide, stream.
So
I often feel that though too. It's like, who are my main friend groups? Like how I spend my time, I'm working or I'm parenting. And like, I might have time to hit the skate park sometimes. It's like, who's at the skate park though? Like a bunch of teenagers on their skateboards and TikTok. Like, I'm not making friends at the skate park.
Like, who's this guy rollerblading?
They all think I'm an undercover cop, like who is this guy? Like, what's he do? Get him out of here. This is weird. I usually go at like 5 a.m. so I can like practice on my own and not look like a
they're
fool.
Not there.
But,
they're not there.
But it's like, I feel that too sometimes where I'm like, I can't just go to my friend group sometimes. So I think that too, adding a level of intentionality in the relationships that we have. I think that might sound daunting, like where do I even start? Or, I should say, it's like start with where you're at. You live in a house. Do you have neighbors? Can you cultivate a relationship with your neighbors? I think that would be great. The people that you work with, if you're working out of the home, who is someone around you? When you go to the neighborhood, the things that you do, like just where you live, work, and play, like that type of paradigm. When you go to the trampoline park or when you go to the neighborhood playground, like who are you meeting there? And can you strike up a conversation? And just like the more that you can widen your network of just friends and just relationship. Network's probably the wrong word because it's like, this is just friends. You're not doing this for the end of like you're a future mentor. Yeah. It's like, no, just love people. And if you're around people and you expand your network, those voices will come to you where it's like, hey, and who wouldn't be honored? It's like, wow. Whenever I'm asked like to hang out or speak something into a neighborhood kid, our house is right on the corner of our neighborhood, so it's kind of like the hub for kids of our kids' age range. The amount of permission and access that I have from their parents too, they're like, and they know I work with kids, so maybe they kind of like fall into that, but that's been so awesome and it's so easy. Like they just see me and they're like, or I see them. And I'm like, hey, and it's just a quick exchange. Hey, could you speak life? Hey, one of our kids had a hard day. Could you speak life or truth over them and whatever that might be. So I think like starting where you're at and just kind of it doesn't have to be weird or anything formal or anything that takes 5 years to do. But just strike up relationships with the people that are around you in your day to day.
Yeah. Well, the neighborhood, they probably see you rolling around on your rollerblades and they're like, oh, he's safe.
He's
Safe. Like,
he's a safe guy.
person.
Like, yeah.
Like, we can trust
any
him.
any rollerblader, they will see all my my PPE, my personal protective equipment, as they call it. Dude, I'm not about to get injured here. Okay, so it's a sight seeing me at the skate park. I don't fit in. Okay, but I've got the knee guards, the elbow pads, the wrist guards, the helmets. I do it all. I'm not getting injured, right? I got to stay out on my skates. So it is it's actually one of those where it's like, stay away from that guy, kids. It's like, that guy can't be trusted. But they know he's safe.
You reach a certain point in life where you're like, I can't afford financially or
right
time-wise to get injured.
Exactly.
Like,
Yes.
I can't afford to be sidelined.
Right.
Like, I'm a big basketball player, and I rolled like, at one point in time, I think I rolled my ankle like 8 times in a calendar year. And so like now, like I wear braces on both my ankles, and it's like they're like Fort Knox.
Yes.
Like it takes me like 15 minutes when I get to the courts just to get my braces
worth
on.
it.
But I'm like, I'm not playing without them. Because I'm like, I can't afford to roll an ankle.
Yes.
And be hobbling around the house,
For sure. I hit a new athletic low. I think you're going to like this. A couple of, 6 weeks ago, I broke my foot, and I did it in a child's ball pit. It was our oldest girl's birthday party. We went to a trampoline park ball pit place. They had like an American Ninja Warrior type like thing over a ball pit, and I went off of the thing and hit my foot on the way down and broke it. I'm like, man, if ball pits aren't safe for me anymore, I might just wear a helmet and these wrist pads everywhere, elbow guards everywhere I go.
And people are like, and that guy's the reason why you have waivers.
Yes. Right. Oh,
that's
man.
amazing. All right. So what is the risk involved if parents don't, I'm trying to figure out how to word it. If parents don't appropriately leverage their influence and the influence of others in the life of their kids, what's the risk involved? Because this is so crucial.
For sure.
It's so important.
I think it comes down to the foundational truth that like kids will be influenced by something. Kids will be influenced by someone. Who is it going to be? And what is it going to be?
Wow.
What's that message? So if you could just like wrap your mind around that, knowing that eternal truth, that it's like your kids are developing into someone. They're going to they're not who they are going to become. Something's going to influence that. Man, that's the role of a parent, is like you've been entrusted by God to steward his children and help them get from where they are to where he intended them to be. And so I think that, the risk would be going a totally different route, that it's like, oh wow, my kid is totally different, or they don't have like, what's parenting with the end in mind. That's also a popular parenting axiom, guiding principle. Comes from a book called Parenting Beyond Your Capacity. And if we're parenting with the end in mind, who do we want our kids to become? And who they become is way more important than what they do. Like, we've got to recognize that, because it's the default thing of, all right, what athletic skills or academics or, those types of things, while all good pursuits, is that really what we want? Is that the goal of parenting, to have a really good basketball player, really good rollerblader? It's like, well, yeah, totally. You do want that. but it's like, who they are matters so much more than what they do. And we need a plan to get them there. It's like with athletics, we put so much intentionality into, all right, we're going to put them on a sports team and give them a coach. Isn't it funny that like we put a lot of intentionality into developing their athletic career, their academic career? It's like, or call it a career, but like their academic trajectory. All right, we're going to put teachers and tutors, and we're going to really think about your education, and we're going to put a lot. What about their character development? Like, there's no coaches for that. There's no workshops. There's no team you can join to like have a higher level of integrity or grow up into a secure, healthy adult that contributes into the world. Like, those types of things like aren't as easy or obvious, and so they can just go by the wayside with well-intentioned parents who neglect those aspects. And then like who they are becoming gets shaped by their peers or culture or the internet or whatever it might be. So I think like it's kind of like turning on the light bulb and realizing that, like that's one. If you could be self-aware in that, and then also self-aware in how you parent and the things that you're passing on and what you're modeling. It's like if the risk would be you're going to pass on, some aspects of yourself that you don't want to. It's going to impact them for the rest of their life. I don't say that to be like scary and hyperbolic. I just say that because it's true. It's like, and it's not to say though that it's fixed. Like you can't, like the kids are never too far gone. You can always adjust. It's like what you do at the time that you have left with them, or it's like that all really, really matters. But to really influence that, you could have a trail of generational sin or a lack of self-awareness, or just kids going a different route that you wouldn't necessarily want.
Man, I love that answer so much. And we've talked on this podcast a lot about, an inheritance is what you leave to a kid, a legacy is what you leave in them. And to me, I don't care as much about what my kids want to do with their lives as in terms of career or hobbies or interests. Like, I hope they love basketball, because I love basketball. Like, and I hope I can share that with them one day. If they love soccer, but like I'll support them. I'll support them in it.
There you go. Yes.
If they love hockey, like it's gonna smell and it's gonna cost a lot of money, but like I'll support them in it. But like whatever they want to do or are interested in, man, I can support that. I don't care as much about that as much as I care about who they are. What kind of basketball player are you? Not talking about skill wise, talking about character wise, sportsmanship. What kind of, if you want to be a doctor, what kind of doctor are you going to be? If you want to be a teacher, what kind of teacher? If you want to enter the marketplace, what kind of person are you going to be when you're selling?
Yeah.
Like that's what I care most about with how my kids grow up. Is like what kind of character and integrity are they going to have? And that right there is where we really need to focus on leveraging our influence as parents, because like, man, that's the most important thing. Like I don't need to get my kid working out, doing basketball drills 7 days a week so he can make the NBA one day. Like the odds are against him in that, like I'm 6 foot, my wife's 5'2". The odds aren't very good for them. But whatever they want to do, man, I can raise them to have the character and integrity to be great at whatever they do, and do it with integrity.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I love your approach, and it makes me think of so many things. One, like caring about their character and who they're becoming way more than what they do. Like all that matters so much. And especially like it just makes me recognize like what is our role as parents? Like take a look at how did you spend your week with your kids over the last week, the last month? Like what do you do when you're together? Is there just activities that you go do? Like you can add a layer of intentionality, just like take one step of intentionality of like thinking about who they're becoming, or what are the activities you do? Are you pulling in the kids to do the things that you want to do because you want to do it? Like, is that the ultimate point? Or, I love like one of my buddies, who, his kid is really into birds right now, like loves birds. And it's like, all right, I don't know anything about birds. And I'm like, and my friend is telling me, he's naming all these like, really crazy birds. And they like took a family trip to go out a couple hours to like go see this rare bird or something. And I'm like, dude, do you enjoy this? He's like, no, I don't love birds. But he said this, he's like, I don't love birds. I don't watch birds because I love birds. I watch birds because I love my son. And my son loves birds, and I love spending time with him. That's the way that I get into his life. That's how I can create more influence. I don't just shout disciplinary, commands from afar. I get in the world with him, and I just spend time with him. Like that's how you cultivate relationships and influence and trust with a kid. Is like do what the kid wants to do. Go into their world. So much of a kid's world says, hey, adjust yourself, child, to live in this adult world. And it's like, we should be doing so much of the opposite. Where it's like, let's get out on a kid's level and do what they want to do. And then once we're at their level, let's think about what's a level of intentionality that can take them to the next level, with their character, who they are, or whatever it might be. But it's like, when you can speak their language, use what a kid knows to teach them what they don't yet know. So like enter into their world, speak their language, do their things. That's going to communicate so much. It's that adage that, well, the famous one of like, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's like that translates to a child too. It's like a kid spells time, or a kid spells love. You could say two ways, T-I-M-E, for time, and a kid spells love Trust. It's like, or see, I flipped that. I flipped that open. The way that a kid spells love and trust is Time. That's what it is. Or it's like just spend time with them. Most of impactful, effective, spiritual parenting is unremarkable. It just really is. You don't have to have these like amazing programs or this intentional thing that you did that took you 3 months to cultivate, this strategy of how to get other role models into their life. It's like, just spend time with them and you will gain their love and their trust, and you'll enter into their world, and you will have way more opportunities if you just spend time with them to speak into those types of things.
And I love what you're saying, like take an interest in their stuff, and like kids will start taking an interest in some of your stuff, like when they're little, like, I'm a big basketball fan. The NBA playoffs are right now. And so Jace gets excited when I watch the Sixers, he's like, oh, the Sixers are playing. You're wearing your Sixers shirt. Like, he gets excited, but it's like, man, 4 years ago, I had no idea what an excavator was. I can tell you every construction truck in the site now because my kid loves construction trucks. And so it's like, I had to learn what an excavator was, all these things. And it's like, people could laugh at me, whatever. Like, but like, man, like that's his world. He loves truck. And it's like right now he loves board games. Yes. All he wants to do is play Sorry in Trouble.
Yes.
Like that's all he wants to do, and he's 3, and he can do it. He can handle it, And it's like, man, that's like, and I'm a big board game fan. Like I love it. So it's like, this is great, And sometimes his interests are going to align with yours, and you're going to want to do things you both enjoy together. Other times it's like, hey, I hate birds. Yeah, this is boring. But I'm doing it with my kid, and this is the most precious time in the world right now. Yeah, and I love what you said. How did you say? Use what they love to teach them what they don't know. I might have butchered what you said. But I love that idea of like, man, leverage that influence, because there's so many things you have to teach your kids. There's so many ways you can influence them. There's so many ways that they need you to step up, take charge for their future, that they're counting on you for. And man, are you present enough to have that influence, especially when it really matters?
Yes. Oh, that's great. I've had so many like epiphanies about this too, when it's like, there are certain ways that I've tried to teach my kids something, whether it's like navigating sibling rivalries, for instance. It's like, I could open up the Bible and speak to them, all the one another's of, love one another. Because, see, like it's in the Bible, God says, and it's like, okay, that doesn't hit them. I could like teach them the definition, and I can like deductively say like, this is logically why you want to, why you have family. And like, I could shame them into like what they're supposed to do. It's like all these tactics that I did. Then there was one time where I remember we watched Frozen. And I happen to love movies, but I'm like, what movies and stories have opened up into like a world of conversation for kids. It's just amazing. Cause I remember talking to our girls once about Anna and Elsa, like, and they weren't specifically two characters in the movie who weren't getting along, or they had some beef between them. And it's like, they had to work through it, but like they loved each other unconditionally at the end. And like, I just noticed that like we had an informal post Frozen conversation as a kid of like, or a conversation as a family. And we were just like, hey, have you ever felt the way that Anna did or Elsa did or whatever? And it's like the kids just opened up and shared everything. Wow. And it was like, oh, yes, I know exactly how that feels, because I don't understand father with a book, the logic, it's like all that. But yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, I felt that. And so using kid stories, but again, it's just that principle, enter into their world. Yeah. That will open up so much to opportunity to speak into them, to make them open up. They'll ask questions. They resonate with something deeper with story and character like that, as opposed to doing what so often is like virtual babysitter. Let's just put on a movie and check out. I'll go do what I want to do. It's like, well, you might be I get that there's space and time for that. I need that as well, like an adult timeout. Like I need time away from our kids.
Sure.
However, like to make the most of every opportunity, like use their world to enter into it and talk to them about things that matter. Like they're going to be so much more receptive and engaging when you do that versus preaching to them. Like no monologue or parental, lecture has ever changed any kid. It's like, You're right, Father. Your 3-point lecture there yelling at me about why I need to change. Like, I get it now. I will be different. Like it's just not the case.
Yeah. But they learn so much by watching.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They learn, we underestimate, more is caught than taught. Mm-hmm. And we underestimate that.
Yes.
As much as we underestimate our influence, like my wife and I both, we're very intentional about saying sorry when we make a mistake or something. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, Jace, who's 3, he'll run around and, he'll bump into you and be, oh, sorry. Like he just, it's like, sorry is like just an extra word that he just uses all the time now, But it's like, it's this idea that it's like, they're watching, they're mimicking. Even if they're teenagers, even if they're adults sometimes, it's like they're watching, they're mimicking, they're taking cues, they're learning. Yeah. And you have more influence than you think.
Oh, yes.
You really
do. For
do.
sure. It's also been said, you're talking about more is caught than taught. Like kids will learn way more from your example than they will your opinion. It's also said that kids are great at intuition, but they're really bad at interpretation. A kid will understand what's going on. Like they'll pick up on things. It's like, I didn't even know you were watching. Like, how did you know I did that? Or what did you that side comment that I said, you picked up on it. So intuition, like they're very intuitive. Kids very much like, that's how you learn and grow. That's how their brain grows so much. It's like, I'm looking all around and watching the world around me to learn how do I fit into this and how do I operate in it. But the interpretation part is like, they're really bad at that. They need a lot of help, a lot of perspective, a lot of redirecting. It's like, well, this is why that, it's like, so helping them interpret things of life, I think is also key.
I see that so much in my 3-year-old right now. That intuition is just like, and it's hilarious sometimes. It is absolutely hilarious sometimes. But it's a joy to watch. It's a joy to watch him grow. And I feel like there's so much I can learn from watching his intuition flourish.
Yes.
But dude, thank you so much for coming on, man. I have loved this conversation all the way from hearing about the basketball hoop on your minivan to all of this, man.
Yes.
I think it's really beneficial. So thank you so much for joining the podcast, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me, KG. Appreciate you, man.
Woo. The drop for this week, 2 parts. 1, are you leveraging your influence at home? Do you underestimate or potentially overestimate the amount of influence you have in the life of your kid? And are you leveraging that influence? Are you being intentional with the time that you have and spending it with your kids? And the second part, do you have others that are speaking life and positive things into the life of your kids? Because while you are the most important voice of influence in the life of your kid, you can't be the only voice of influence. And so Anthony talked about getting 5 other voices. Man, if you can't get that, start with 1, start with 2. Get some other voices that you know and trust that will speak love and life and positive things into the life of your kids. You can't be the only one. You're the most important one. You can't be the only one. So those 2 things, man, make sure you are leveraging your influence and get some others to have influence in the life of your kids as well. Some adults that you know and trust. Man, we love y'all. Appreciate you tuning in for this episode. Wherever you're at, take care of yourself. Take care of your family. This is Kicks and Minivans.